finding your authentic self is like peeling back layers to reveal the core of who you are. It's a journey filled with moments of doubt and struggle, where you confront uncomfortable truths about yourself. Imagine a man who has spent years living by others' expectations, never truly satisfied. One day, he decides to face his fears and dig deep into his soul. He starts to recognize his desires, strengths, and even his flaws. This process, though painful, leads to a powerful realization. When he embraces his true self, he begins to attract everything he's always wanted. It's raw, it's tough, but it's real. Once he does, he becomes the hero of his own story, confident and unstoppable. Lesson 1. Leaving the nest. Leaving the nest, stepping out of that comfort zone, might just be one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make. Imagine growing up surrounded by all the familiar things, the streets you've walked 1,000 times, the people you've known forever, the predictable rhythm of life that feels safe and unthreatening. It's a comforting existence, like wrapping yourself in a warm blanket against the cold uncertainty of the outside world. But eventually, that blanket begins to feel heavy, even suffocating. There's a subtle restlessness that begins to grow within you, a soft whisper that tells you there's more out there. And it's true, comfort can only take you so far. It keeps you steady, but it also keeps you stagnant. Real growth, the kind that reshapes who you are at your core, only comes when you break free from that safety and step into the unknown. The first step in this transformation is leaving what you know behind, your hometown, your routine, your surroundings. And this is where things get scary. You're not just leaving a place, you're leaving a piece of yourself, the part of you that's been defined by where you've been and who you've always been around. Suddenly, you're thrust into new environments, surrounded by unfamiliar faces and challenges you couldn't have predicted. You're forced to adapt. You're forced to grow. And in that process, you discover parts of yourself that you didn't even know were there. Take the example of a man who has spent his entire life in the same small town. Everyone knows him. He's the quiet one, the reliable one, the guy who never rocks the boat. These labels have been with him for so long that he's forgotten what it feels like to just be himself. He starts to realize that these labels are more like chains than they are descriptors, limiting who he can be. So one day, he makes the decision to leave. He packs his bags, says his goodbyes, and steps into the unknown, hoping to find something more. The moment he steps off the train in a new city, everything is different. The air smells unfamiliar, the people move with a different energy, and for the first time in his life, he's not the quiet one or the reliable one. He's just a man in a new place, free to redefine who he is. At first, it's disorienting. Without those labels, he feels almost lost. But slowly, he begins to uncover pieces of himself that have been buried for years. Maybe he realizes that he loves art, or that he's braver than he ever gave himself credit for. Without the weight of other people's expectations, he's free to explore who he truly is, to reinvent himself without the baggage of his past. Leaving the nest isn't just about redefining who you are, though. It's also about confronting loneliness. When you leave everything familiar behind, you leave behind the comfort of companionship as well. There are no familiar faces to turn to when things get tough. You're alone in the truest sense, relying only on yourself. That solitude can be crushing at first. There will be nights when the silence feels unbearable, when the loneliness seeps in and makes you question why you ever left in the first place. But it's in those moments of solitude that you learn to trust yourself. You realize that you can stand on your own 2 feet, even when the ground beneath you feels shaky. Think about the traveler who sets off on a journey, not just to explore new places, but to explore themselves. They find themselves in a country where they don't speak the language, where the food is unfamiliar and the culture is different from anything they've known. In the beginning, the loneliness feels overwhelming. They miss the comforts of home, the ease of communication, the presence of people who understand them without needing words. But over time, something shifts. They start to build a relationship with themselves. They find solace in their own company, learning to rely on their own strength and resilience. This newfound independence becomes a foundation they can stand on, no matter where they are in the world. Starting a new chapter is also about reinvention. When you leave the comfort of your old life behind, you're given the opportunity to rebuild yourself. Imagine someone who has spent years working a steady job, going through the motions without passion or purpose. They've always dreamed of something more, but fear has kept them rooted in place. One day, they decide to take a leap of faith. They quit their job, move to a new city, and start pursuing what they love. Maybe it's a creative career or a passion project they've been putting off for years. At first, it's terrifying. The security they once knew is gone, replaced by the uncertainty of the unknown. But as they throw themselves into this new adventure, they begin to find their footing. They discover talents they never had the chance to explore before, strengths that were buried under the routine of their old life. This process of leaving the nest, of stepping out of your comfort zone, is a journey of self-discovery. It's not easy, far from it. There will be moments when fear grips you, when you doubt your ability to survive outside of what you've always known. But it's in those moments of doubt and discomfort that you grow the most. You start to peel back the layers of who you thought you were and begin to uncover the truth of who you are at your core. Leaving the nest forces you to face the unknown head-on. You're confronted with new experiences that challenge you in ways you've never been challenged before. You meet people who see the world differently than you, who introduce you to ideas and ways of living that you might never have considered. You begin to question everything you thought you knew about yourself, about life, about the world around you. But through this process, you begin to realize that the only thing holding you back was the fear of leaving what was comfortable. You begin to understand that comfort, while it may feel good in the moment, is a kind of prison. It keeps you locked in place, preventing you from growing into the person you're truly meant to be. And when you finally break free from that prison, when you take that leap into the unknown, you discover a freedom unlike anything you've ever experienced before. This journey isn't for the faint of heart. It's a path filled with challenges and setbacks, with moments of loneliness and fear. But it's also a path that leads to transformation. Each step you take away from your comfort zone brings you closer to the person you're meant to become. Each new experience shapes you, refines you, and helps you discover strengths and abilities you didn't even know you had. So, when you leave the nest, when you finally break free from the confines of your old life, you're not just stepping into a new world, you're stepping into a new version of yourself. You're shedding the old labels, the old limitations, and embracing the possibility of who you can become. And while the road ahead may be uncertain, it's filled with endless potential. Because the truth is, the only thing stopping you from becoming who you truly are is the fear of leaving behind what you've always known. And once you let go of that fear, there's nothing left to hold you back. Lesson 2. Heartbreak is fuel for growth. Heartbreak has a way of lingering, doesn't it? Even when you think you've moved past the worst of it, there are still moments, unexpected and uninvited, where the pain resurfaces. A certain song might play, or you catch a glimpse of something that reminds you of the past, and suddenly, you're back in that place of hurt, even if just for a brief moment. But instead of seeing this as something to dread or avoid, there's an opportunity here. Those moments are reminders of how far you've come, and they also provide another chance to continue channeling that pain into growth. This lingering pain isn't a sign of weakness. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It shows that you're human, that you've loved deeply enough to feel that kind of hurt. And while it's uncomfortable, it also means you have more fuel to continue your journey of self-improvement. Each time you feel that pang of heartbreak, it's another chance to ask yourself, what can I learn from this, or how can I use this to keep moving forward? Take someone who went through a particularly brutal breakup. For months, they felt stuck in a loop of sadness and regret, questioning every aspect of the relationship and themselves. But over time, they began to notice something shifting. The sadness was still there, but it wasn't as overwhelming as before. And more importantly, they found themselves becoming more self-aware. They started noticing patterns in their behavior that contributed to the relationship's problems, moments when they were too passive or didn't speak up for themselves. These realizations, painful as they were, became the building blocks of personal growth. One day, after reflecting on these patterns, they made a conscious decision to change. They started setting boundaries in their relationships, both romantic and platonic. They worked on communicating their needs more clearly and confidently. And while the pain of the breakup still lingered, it had transformed into something constructive. It wasn't just a source of suffering anymore, it had become a tool for building a stronger, more self-aware version of themselves. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process, one that requires patience and a willingness to sit with discomfort. There will be setbacks along the way, moments when the pain feels just as fresh as it did in the beginning. But with each setback, there's also an opportunity for growth. You start to realize that heartbreak, for all its intensity, isn't something that has to define you or hold you back. Instead, it can be the very thing that pushes you forward, that forces you to confront parts of yourself that you've been avoiding and helps you become the person you're meant to be. Another powerful lesson heartbreak teaches is the importance of self-compassion. It's easy to be hard on yourself after a breakup, to pick apart every decision you made and to blame yourself for the relationship's failure. But this kind of self-criticism only deepens the pain. What's needed in these moments is kindness toward yourself. Just as you would offer support and understanding to a friend going through a breakup, you need to offer that same compassion to yourself. One way to practice this is by acknowledging that you did the best you could with what you knew at the time. Relationships are complex, and it's impossible to be perfect. Mistakes are inevitable, and heartbreak is often a result of two people trying their best but still falling short of what was needed to make the relationship work. When you start to see your role in the relationship through a lens of self-compassion, it becomes easier to learn from your mistakes without letting them define you. Instead of seeing the breakup as a failure, you begin to see it as a stepping stone, an experience that, painful as it was, is helping you grow into a better version of yourself. Imagine someone who had a pattern of being overly accommodating in their relationships, always putting their partner's needs before their own. After a particularly painful breakup, they began to reflect on why this kept happening. Through therapy and self-reflection, they realized that this pattern was rooted in a fear of rejection and a desire to avoid conflict. Once they became aware of this, they started working on developing healthier boundaries and learning to prioritize their own needs. It wasn't easy, and there were times when they slipped back into old habits, but with each new relationship, they became stronger and more confident in their ability to advocate for themselves. Heartbreak, in this sense, becomes a kind of mirror. It forces you to look at yourself in ways you might not have before. It reveals your vulnerabilities, your fears, and the ways in which you might be holding yourself back. But it also reveals your strengths, your capacity for resilience, for growth, and for love. And as painful as it is, heartbreak has a way of sharpening your focus. It makes you more aware of what you truly want in a relationship and, just as importantly, what you need to feel fulfilled and valued. For some, heartbreak might be the push they need to pursue something they've always wanted but never had the courage to go after. Maybe it's starting a new career, moving to a new city, or finally taking that solo trip they've always dreamed of. Heartbreak, by breaking down the old structures of your life, creates space for something new to emerge. It strips away the illusions and forces you to confront what truly matters to you. And once you've had that clarity, you're in a position to build a life that's more aligned with your values and desires. Think of someone who, after a breakup, decides to make a drastic change. They quit their job, sell their belongings, and set off on a year-long journey around the world. It's something they'd always dreamed of doing, but they never had the motivation or the freedom to make it happen until the heartbreak shattered the old version of their life. The pain of the breakup gave them the push they needed to finally take the leap. And while the journey didn't erase the heartbreak, it transformed it. Along the way, they discovered new passions, met incredible people, and found a sense of purpose they hadn't felt in years. In the end, heartbreak isn't just about loss. It's about transformation. It's about stripping away the old, the familiar, and the comfortable, and creating space for something new to emerge. It's about using the pain as fuel for growth, for self-discovery, and for becoming the person you're truly meant to be. Heartbreak, for all its agony, is an invitation to step into a new chapter of your life, one that's richer, deeper, and more aligned with who you truly are. So while the pain of heartbreak may feel overwhelming at times, remember that it's also a gift. It's an opportunity to reflect, to grow, and to build a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. It's a reminder that you're capable of surviving even the most intense emotional pain and that you have the power to turn that pain into something beautiful. And as you move through the process of healing, you'll find that the heartbreak that once seemed unbearable becomes a source of strength, a catalyst for growth, and a stepping stone toward the life you've always wanted. In this way, heartbreak doesn't just mark an ending, it marks a new beginning. It's the start of a journey towards self-discovery, self-improvement, and ultimately, self-love. And while the road may be difficult, it's also filled with possibility. Because once you've faced the pain of heartbreak and come out the other side, you realize that there's nothing you can't handle, and that's where the real growth begins. If you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Your subscription helps us keep creating content with love and dedication. Lesson 3. The power of sobriety. Addiction is a strange thing. It starts small, almost innocuously, a drink to unwind after a long day, a little something to take the edge off, a moment of escape from the stress and noise of life. But before you know it, what started as a momentary relief begins to take up more space in your life. It becomes less about enjoyment and more about necessity, a crutch you lean on to get through the day. The substances, whatever they may be, alcohol, drugs, or something else, start to control you. They offer a temporary escape, a brief moment of numbness where the pain fades into the background. But that's all it is, temporary. And the more you rely on them, the more you realize that you're not escaping the pain at all. You're just delaying the inevitable confrontation with it. Sobriety is the opposite of that escape. It's about facing your pain head-on, without any buffers or distractions. It's about stripping away the crutches and standing on your own 2 feet, no matter how shaky they might feel at first. This is where the power of sobriety truly lies, not in the absence of substances, but in the presence of clarity. When you're sober, you're forced to confront your inner struggles, to deal with the emotions you've been numbing for so long. And it's hard. There's no denying that. But it's also the only way to truly heal. Imagine someone who has used alcohol as a way to cope with stress for years. At first, it was just a drink here and there to take the edge off after a tough day. But over time, it became more than that. It became a routine, a necessity. They started to rely on that drink to get through the day, to unwind at night, to forget about the things they didn't want to face. But instead of making life easier, the alcohol made it harder. It clouded their judgment, numbed their emotions, and kept them from dealing with the underlying issues that were causing their stress in the first place. One day, they decide they've had enough. The alcohol isn't helping anymore, it's only making things worse. So, they make the choice to get sober. At first, it's incredibly difficult. The cravings are intense, the emotions they've been numbing for years come flooding back, and they feel more lost than ever. But as they push through those initial challenges, something begins to change. They start to see things more clearly. Without the fog of alcohol clouding their mind, they begin to understand the root causes of their stress and anxiety. They realize that the things they were trying to escape from aren't as insurmountable as they once seemed. And with that clarity comes the ability to start working through those issues in a productive way. Sobriety doesn't just clear the fog, it also opens the door to creativity. When you're not using substances to escape from your emotions, you're forced to find other ways to deal with them. For many people, this leads to a surge of creativity. Instead of self-destructing, they start to channel their pain into something meaningful. Maybe it's writing, painting, music, or some other form of artistic expression. Or maybe it's something more practical, like building a business or pursuing a passion they'd long ignored. Whatever it is, the act of creating becomes a way to process emotions, to turn something painful into something beautiful. Consider an artist who struggled with addiction for years. During their darkest times, they used substances to numb the pain, to escape from the harsh realities of life. But the art they created during that time was empty, lacking the depth and emotion that had once fueled their work. When they finally decided to get sober, it was like a dam had broken. All the emotions they had been suppressing came rushing out, and they poured them into their art. The result was some of the most powerful, authentic work they had ever created. Sobriety didn't just give them back their life, it gave them back their creativity, their ability to connect with others through their art. Taking control of your relationship with substances, rather than letting them control you, is a key part of personal empowerment. It's about recognizing that while addiction might have had a hold on you in the past, it doesn't have to define your future. You have the power to change, to take back control of your life, and to start living in a way that's true to who you are. But this requires a conscious decision, a commitment to sobriety that's not just about giving up substances, but about reclaiming your autonomy. Think of someone who used to drink to fit in, to feel more comfortable in social situations. Over time, they started to rely on alcohol as a crutch, believing that they couldn't be themselves without it. But as they began their journey toward sobriety, they started to realize that the opposite was true. The alcohol wasn't helping them be themselves, it was masking who they really were. Once they took control of their drinking, they discovered that they could be social, confident, and authentic without relying on alcohol. They began to build relationships that were based on genuine connections, rather than on the false confidence that alcohol provided. This journey of taking control is about more than just quitting substances, it's about building a life that's fulfilling in ways that temporary highs can't offer. The discipline of sobriety teaches you to find joy and satisfaction in the long term, in the things that truly matter. It's about waking up in the morning with a clear head, knowing that you're living a life that's true to your values. It's about finding fulfillment in the relationships you build, the work you do, and the passions you pursue, rather than in the fleeting escape that substances provide. Imagine someone who, after years of struggling with addiction, finally reaches a point where they're tired of the cycle. They're tired of the highs and lows, the moments of euphoria followed by the crushing lows of withdrawal and regret. So, they decide to make a change. They commit to sobriety, not just as a way to avoid the negative consequences of their addiction, but as a path to something better. At first, the journey is difficult. There are moments of doubt, of temptation, and of feeling like they're missing out. But as they continue on the path of sobriety, they start to experience a different kind of fulfillment, one that's deeper and more lasting than anything they ever got from substances. They begin to take pride in the small things, like waking up without a hangover, or remembering the details of a meaningful conversation. They start to build a life that's rich in experiences and connections, rather than one that's defined by a constant search for the next high. And as they continue on this journey, they realize that the fulfillment they're experiencing now is something they could never have found through addiction. It's a fulfillment that comes from living in alignment with their true self, from building a life that's based on authenticity and self-respect. Sobriety is about so much more than just not drinking or using drugs. It's about reclaiming your life, about taking back control from the substances that once held you captive. It's about finding clarity, creativity, and fulfillment in ways that addiction could never provide. And while the journey is far from easy, it's one of the most empowering choices you can make. As you move forward in sobriety, you start to see the world differently. You notice things you hadn't before, the beauty of a sunrise, the joy of a simple conversation, the satisfaction of a job well done. These might seem like small things, but they add up to something much bigger, a life that's lived fully, with presence and purpose. And in this life, there's no need for the temporary escape that substances once provided. You found something better, something real, and that's the true power of sobriety. The journey of sobriety is not just about avoiding the negative, it's about embracing the positive. It's about building a life that's rich in meaning, in connection, and in self-respect. It's about finding a sense of peace and fulfillment that addiction could never offer. And as you continue on this path, you realize that the power of sobriety lies not just in what you've given up, but in what you've gained, a life that's truly worth living. Lesson 4. The human memory cannot be trusted. The human memory is far from perfect. We like to believe that we remember things clearly, that our minds hold on to important moments and valuable lessons like a perfectly preserved record. But in reality, memory is fluid and often unreliable. Emotions, time, and perspective distort our recollections. What once seemed crystal clear becomes foggy, twisted by the passage of time and the narratives we build around it. We forget details, misremember events, and sometimes even rewrite our own history without realizing it. That's why tracking progress through journaling becomes so crucial. It acts as a counterbalance to the fallibility of memory, offering a clearer lens to see the truth of our own experience. Take someone who is going through a challenging phase in life, whether it's dealing with a breakup, overcoming addiction, or just grappling with the ups and downs of daily stress. In the moment, their emotions are intense and overwhelming. The pain or frustration they feel seems all-encompassing, like it will never end. But once the situation passes, the sharpness of those feelings starts to fade. A month later, they might look back and think, was it really that bad? They might convince themselves that they overreacted or that they had it all under control when, in truth, they struggled. This is where journaling makes a difference. If that person had been journaling throughout the process, they could go back and read their own words from that moment, raw, Unfiltered emotions captured in real time. The journal doesn't lie. It reflects the reality of what they felt and experienced in that exact moment, without the distortions that memory tends to impose. Tracking progress through journaling gives you something that your memory simply can't provide, an objective record of your thoughts and feelings. It's not just about documenting the good or the bad, it's about capturing the full spectrum of your emotional landscape. When you commit to journaling daily, you start to notice patterns that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. You see your highs and your lows, and, more importantly, you begin to spot the triggers that lead to them. Maybe you notice that every time you feel overwhelmed at work, you turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms, like overreading or procrastinating. Or perhaps you realize that whenever you spend time with a certain friend, your mood lifts, and you feel more energized and positive. These patterns are easy to miss when you're just living day by day, relying on your memory to connect the dots. But when you journal regularly, these connections become clear. You start to see the repeating mistakes, the same destructive behaviors popping up over and over again, no matter how much you promised yourself you wouldn't fall into that trap again. It's easy to think, I've learned from this, but without that record to look back on, it's just as easy to forget the lessons you swore you'd never forget. Imagine someone who's trying to break a bad habit, like impulsive spending. Every time they get stressed, they find themselves buying things they don't need as a way to soothe their anxiety. In the moment, it feels like a quick fix, a way to make themselves feel better, but afterward, they're left with regret and a lighter wallet. Over time, they convince themselves that they're getting better, that they're managing their impulses, and that they've learned from their mistakes. But then, months down the road, they find themselves in the same position, stressed, impulsively spending, and regretting it all over again. It's a cycle, one that they're unaware of because their memory is skewed by their desire to believe they've improved. If that person had been journaling, they would have a written record of every time they fell into the trap of impulsive spending. They could look back and see the pattern clearly. Every time I get stressed, I spend money to feel better. Armed with that knowledge, they could start to take steps to address the root cause of their behavior instead of repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Journaling forces you to confront your own behavior in a way that memory alone never could. But it's not just about catching mistakes. Journaling also allows you to acknowledge growth in a way that's difficult to do when you're only relying on memory. In the moment, progress often feels slow, like nothing is changing despite your efforts. You might feel like you're stuck, like you're not moving forward no matter how hard you try. But when you go back and read journal entries from 6 months ago, a year ago, or even just a few weeks ago, you start to see how far you've come. You read your own words and realize that the struggles that once consumed you no longer hold the same power over you. You see the small victories, the moments of strength and resilience that you might have forgotten had you not written them down. Think of someone who has been working through depression. In the thick of it, every day feels like a battle, and it's hard to see any improvement when the darkness feels so heavy. But as they journal through the process, recording their thoughts and emotions, they begin to build a timeline of their journey. Months later, they look back and see how their darkest days have become fewer and farther between. They read the words they wrote when they were in their lowest moments and realize that while they still have bad days, they've also had good ones, days where the sun broke through the clouds, if only for a little while. This acknowledgement of growth is empowering. It reminds them that progress is happening, even if it doesn't always feel that way in the moment. Journaling is also an incredible tool for gaining self-awareness. When you write regularly, you start to notice the subtle shifts in your thoughts and emotions. You become more attuned to what triggers certain reactions, what makes you feel joyful, and what drags you down. This self-awareness helps you better understand yourself, which is the key to making lasting changes in your life. When you know yourself, your patterns, your triggers, your strengths, and your weaknesses, you're better equipped to navigate the challenges that come your way. Consider someone who has always struggled with anger. They often find themselves lashing out at loved ones in moments of frustration, and afterward, they feel guilty and ashamed. For years, they've convinced themselves that they're just someone with a short temper, that it's just who they are. But once they start journaling, they begin to notice a pattern. They realize that their anger is almost always triggered by feelings of helplessness or fear. When they feel like they're not in control of a situation, they lash out as a way to regain that sense of power. This realization is a game changer. With this new self-awareness, they can start working on addressing the root of their anger, rather than just reacting to it in the moment. Finally, journaling helps you use memory as a tool, rather than letting it be a source of distortion. Human memory is flawed, but the written word is not. When you write down your thoughts and experiences, you create a record that you can return to again and again. This record helps you avoid repeating the same mistakes because it preserves the lessons you've learned along the way. It also reinforces positive growth, reminding you of the progress you've made and the person you're becoming. Think of someone who's been on a journey of personal growth for several years. Without journaling, they might only have a vague sense of the progress they've made. But with a journal, they can look back at where they started and see the concrete changes they've made in their life. They can read the entries from the early days when they were just beginning their journey, days filled with uncertainty, self-doubt, and fear. And they can compare those entries to the ones they write now, filled with confidence, clarity, and a sense of purpose. This comparison isn't just about patting themselves on the back, it's a way to reinforce the progress they've made and to remind themselves of the lessons they've learned along the way. In a world where memory can't always be trusted, journaling becomes an invaluable tool for personal growth. It helps you track your progress, identify repeating mistakes, acknowledge your growth, and gain self-awareness. And perhaps most importantly, it turns memory from a source of distortion into a tool for growth, preserving the lessons you've learned and the progress you've made along the way. Lesson 5. Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Blood, sweat, and tears, there's a reason why those words carry so much weight. They're more than just physical markers of hard work, they represent the essence of struggle, of pushing through when everything in you wants to stop, of facing pain head-on and refusing to back down. True personal growth doesn't happen when life is easy and everything falls into place effortlessly. It happens in the moments of grit and grind, in the times when you're forced to confront your limits, when you hit the wall and everything feels impossible. That's where you find out what you're really made of. Think about someone training for a marathon. The first time they set out to run, their body aches, their lungs burn, and they can barely finish a mile. It's frustrating. Their mind is filled with doubts, wondering if they'll ever be able to push past the discomfort. But day after day, they lace up their shoes and keep running. They start to embrace the struggle, realizing that the pain isn't something to avoid, but something to move through. Each drop of sweat becomes a marker of progress. They start to understand that it's not about avoiding the pain, but about becoming stronger in the face of it. And slowly, they notice their endurance increasing, their stride getting longer, and the miles stacking up behind them. It's in these moments of facing struggle head-on that real growth happens. We often think of pain as something negative, something to be avoided at all costs. But pain is a teacher. It shows us where our limits are and invites us to push past them. When you willingly confront pain, whether it's physical pain from a tough workout or emotional pain from a difficult life event, you're allowing yourself to grow. You're stepping into the fire, knowing that it will forge you into something stronger. Take martial arts, for example. When you step into a dojo for the first time, you quickly realize that it's not just about learning how to throw a punch or a kick. It's about discipline, resilience, and learning to control both your body and your mind. You're going to get hit. You're going to lose matches. You're going to fall to the mat more times than you can count. And every time, you'll have to decide whether to get back up. That's where the growth happens, not in the wins, but in the losses, in the moments when you're knocked down and you make the choice to stand back up, to learn from your mistakes, and to keep pushing forward. In martial arts, like in life, discipline is key. It's easy to show up when you're winning, when everything feels good, and success seems within reach. But real discipline shows itself in the moments when you're losing, when it feels like progress is impossible, and when all you want to do is quit. The decision to keep showing up, to keep training even when you're not seeing immediate results, that's what builds resilience. That's what separates those who achieve personal growth from those who stay stuck. This kind of discipline doesn't just apply to physical pursuits. It carries over into every aspect of life. Whether it's waking up early to study for an exam, sticking to a diet when you'd rather indulge, or holding yourself accountable to your goals when no one else is watching, discipline is what allows you to push through the moments of struggle and come out the other side stronger. It's not glamorous, and it often goes unnoticed by others, but it's the foundation of success in any area of life. Consider someone who's taken on a new challenge, maybe starting a business or going back to school after years away. At first, the excitement of the new challenge fuels them. They're motivated, energized, and ready to take on the world. But then the obstacles start to appear. Maybe their business hits financial struggles, or the demands of school begin to wear on them. They start to question whether they've made the right choice, whether they're cut out for this level of commitment. But instead of backing down, they double down on their discipline. They keep showing up, even when it's hard, even when it feels like they're not making progress. And over time, that discipline begins to pay off. The business starts to turn a corner, or their grades begin to improve. It's not about avoiding the struggle, it's about embracing it and pushing through. Failures and setbacks are inevitable, whether you're pursuing martial arts, running a marathon, or chasing a dream. The key is not to see them as the end, but as part of the journey. Every failure holds a lesson if you're willing to look for it. It's in the moments of defeat that you learn the most about yourself, about your weaknesses, your blind spots, and where you need to grow. Think about a boxer who loses a match. It's a painful experience, physically and emotionally. But instead of letting that loss define them, they use it as fuel. They go back to the gym, watch the tape, analyze what went wrong, and then they train even harder. Each loss becomes a stepping stone to getting better, to refining their technique, and to becoming a more complete fighter. The same is true in life. Losses and failures aren't the end of the road, they're opportunities to learn and improve. When you approach them with humility and a willingness to grow, they make you stronger. But that requires a shift in mindset. Instead of fearing failure, you start to see it as a necessary part of the process. You realize that every time you fail, you're given a chance to learn something new, to get a little bit better, and to come back stronger than before. And then there are the dark times, the moments when life throws challenges at you that feel too big to handle. Maybe it's the loss of a loved one, a personal health crisis, or a financial setback that turns your world upside down. These are the moments that test you in ways you never anticipated. They strip you down to your core, leaving you vulnerable and exposed. But they also reveal something else, your hidden strength. When everything falls apart, you discover what you're truly capable of enduring. Take someone who's faced with a sudden illness. Their life is turned upside down overnight. What once felt certain and secure is now filled with uncertainty and fear. But in the midst of this struggle, they find a strength they didn't know they had. They endure the treatments, the pain, and the uncertainty because they realize that giving up isn't an option. They find strength in the small victories, in getting out of bed when they didn't think they could, in making it through a difficult day, in simply holding on when everything feels like it's falling apart. This strength doesn't come from avoiding the pain, it comes from facing it, from moving through it, and from refusing to let it break you. Finally, there's a deep sense of self-respect that comes from overcoming challenges. When you face the pain, embrace the discipline, and learn from your failures, you build a sense of pride in yourself that no one can take away. It's not about the accolades or the external recognition, it's about knowing, deep down, that you stayed true to yourself. You faced the struggle and didn't back down. You pushed through the hard times and came out the other side stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Think about someone who's been through a personal crisis, a divorce, a job loss, or a major life transition. In the beginning, it feels like their world is falling apart. But as they work through the pain, they begin to rebuild. Slowly but surely, they start to piece their life back together. And in doing so, they discover a sense of self-respect that wasn't there before. They realize that they are capable of more than they ever imagined. They've faced the fire, and they've come out stronger. Blood, sweat, and tears, they're the markers of struggle, but they're also the markers of growth. When you face the pain head-on, when you embrace the discipline required to push through the hard times, and when you learn from your failures, you build a sense of inner strength and self-respect that no one can take away. Lesson 6. Solitude holds the answers. Solitude can be a daunting experience for many. We live in a world where noise surrounds us, constant chatter, notifications buzzing in our pockets, music in the background, the hum of everyday life. It can feel uncomfortable to sit alone with nothing but your thoughts, no distractions to fill the silence. Yet, it's in these quiet moments that some of the most profound answers reveal themselves. Solitude, when embraced, is like a mirror that reflects the deepest parts of who you are, untainted by the opinions, judgments, and expectations of others. It's a space where you can finally hear your own voice clearly, away from the noise of the world. Think of someone who has always been surrounded by people, constantly moving from one social event to the next, always with a friend or a phone to keep them company. Their life feels full, but there's an underlying sense of emptiness, a feeling that they're disconnected from something essential. They've never spent enough time alone to really listen to their own thoughts, to figure out what they truly want. One day, they decide to disconnect from it all, turn off their phone, leave behind the crowded spaces, and simply spend a weekend by themselves. The first few hours are difficult, the silence feels oppressive, and they're tempted to reach for their phone out of habit. But as the hours pass, something shifts. They begin to feel a sense of peace, and their mind starts to wander to places it hadn't gone in a long time. Old dreams resurface, buried desires come to the forefront, and they begin to realize that beneath the layers of social expectations and external noise, there's a part of themselves that they've been ignoring. Solitude has a way of stripping away the unnecessary layers of life. When you're alone, you're no longer performing for others. There's no one to impress, no expectations to meet, and no distractions to pull your focus away. It's just you and your thoughts, and that can be both terrifying and liberating. In solitude, you start to confront the parts of yourself that you've been avoiding, the doubts, the fears, the dreams you've suppressed because they seemed too unrealistic or impractical. But it's also where you begin to discover your true desires, the things you want not because others expect them of you, but because they resonate with who you are at your core. Imagine someone who's always felt pressure to follow a particular path in life, maybe from their family or society's expectations. They've checked all the boxes, gotten the right degree, secured a good job, built a respectable life. On paper, everything looks perfect. But inside, they feel restless, like something is missing. They can't quite put their finger on it, but there's a gnawing feeling that they're not living the life they're meant to live. So, they take a step back. They decide to spend time alone, away from the hustle and bustle, to really think about what they want. And in that solitude, the answer becomes clear. Maybe it's a desire to pursue a creative passion they've always had but never made time for. Or perhaps they realize they've been living someone else's dream and it's time to start living their own. Whatever the revelation, it only comes because they allowed themselves the space to listen to their inner voice. Solitude also gives you the opportunity to practice mindful reflection. This isn't the same as just sitting alone while scrolling through your phone or half-watching TV. True solitude means disconnecting from all external distractions and being fully present with yourself. It's about letting your mind wander without the constant interruption of notifications or entertainment. In these moments, you're able to engage in deep reflection, to think about your life, your choices, and where you're headed. You begin to ask yourself the big questions. What do I really want? What's important to me? What kind of life am I building? Take someone who regularly spends time alone but rarely uses that time to reflect. They might spend hours by themselves, but it's always with some form of distraction, playing video games, watching Netflix, scrolling through social media. While they're technically alone, they're not really experiencing solitude because their mind is constantly occupied by external stimuli. But when they decide to spend time in mindful reflection, sitting quietly without distractions, they start to uncover things they hadn't noticed before. Maybe they realize they're not as happy with their career as they thought, or that a relationship they've been in isn't fulfilling. It's only in these quiet, reflective moments that these realizations can surface, giving them the clarity they need to make changes in their life. For many extroverts, solitude can feel uncomfortable, like something to be avoided. Extroverts thrive on social interaction, drawing energy from being around others. But even extroverts need solitude from time to time. In fact, it's often the extroverts who benefit the most from stepping away from the noise and spending time alone. It's a chance for them to recharge, to reconnect with themselves, and to reflect on their own needs and desires without the influence of others. Solitude gives extroverts the space to think more deeply about their lives, their goals, and what truly matters to them. Conversely, for introverts, solitude is a natural and necessary part of life. It's where they feel most comfortable and where they can recharge their energy. But even introverts need to strike a balance. Too much solitude can lead to isolation, which can stifle creativity and inspiration. Introverts may need to remind themselves to engage with the outside world from time to time, to seek out social interactions that inspire and energize them. The key is finding a balance between solitude and connection, between the internal world of reflection and the external world of relationships and experiences. Ultimately, solitude is an essential tool for personal growth. When you spend time alone, without distractions, you're able to reconnect with your core values. You start to remember what's truly important to you, beyond the noise of daily life. You gain a deeper sense of self-awareness, understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, and what drives you. And with this self-awareness comes the ability to make decisions that align with your authentic self. Consider someone who's been feeling lost for a while, unsure of what direction their life is headed in. They've been so caught up in the demands of work, relationships, and daily responsibilities that they haven't had time to really think about what they want. So, they decide to take a break from it all. Maybe they go on a solo retreat or simply spend more time alone at home. In that solitude, they begin to reflect on their life. They think about their values, their passions, and the kind of life they want to create. Slowly, clarity begins to emerge. They start to make decisions that are more aligned with who they are, rather than what others expect of them. Maybe they decide to switch careers, pursue a creative project, or make a major life change. Whatever it is, the decision comes from a place of authenticity, not external pressure. This is the true power of solitude. It helps you find your way back to yourself. It gives you the space to listen to your own voice, to discover what you truly want, and to make choices that are aligned with your values. In a world that's constantly pulling you in different directions, solitude is the anchor that keeps you grounded. It's where you find the answers to the questions you didn't even know you were asking. Lesson 7. No one cares about you. There's a certain liberation that comes with realizing that most people aren't paying as much attention to you as you might think. We spend so much of our lives worried about how others perceive us, whether they're judging us, criticizing our choices, or talking behind our backs. It's almost second nature to hold back, to adjust our behavior to fit what we believe others expect of us. But here's the truth: no one cares about you, not in the harsh, cold way it might sound, but in a freeing, almost comforting way. Most people are so wrapped up in their own lives, their own concerns, that they hardly notice the details of yours. And once you realize that, you unlock a kind of freedom you may never have experienced before. Think about the last time you walked into a room and felt self-conscious. Maybe you were at a party, feeling like everyone's eyes were on you, noticing every little thing, from your outfit to the way you talked. But in reality, most of those people were likely too busy thinking about themselves. They were preoccupied with their own insecurities, their own worries about what others might think of them. When you start to internalize this, it changes the way you approach the world. It allows you to let go of the fear of judgment, to stop living with the constant weight of other people's opinions on your shoulders. Letting go of judgment is a process, and it doesn't happen overnight. We're conditioned from a young age to care about what others think. It's ingrained in us by society, by school, by family. We're taught to fit in, to avoid standing out too much, to seek approval. But the reality is, once you understand that people aren't scrutinizing your every move, you can begin to let go of that need for approval. You realize that no one is watching you as closely as you imagined, and that's an incredibly liberating thought. Take someone who spent years afraid to pursue their true passion. Let's say they've always wanted to be an artist, but they chose a more acceptable career in finance because that's what was expected of them. For years, they denied their creative side, convincing themselves that no one would take them seriously as an artist. They were afraid of being judged for abandoning a stable career in favor of something so uncertain. But then, one day, they realized that no one really cares. People might have opinions, but those opinions are fleeting. People move on. Once this person understands that, they're free to pursue what truly makes them happy. They stop worrying about whether their choices are acceptable to others and start focusing on what's meaningful to them. This shift in perspective, understanding that no one is really watching you as closely as you think, opens up so much space in your life. You no longer need to seek validation from others. You can stop waiting for permission to live the life you want to live. Instead, you can give yourself that permission. When you're not constantly seeking approval from others, you start to focus on what really matters, what makes you happy, what fulfills you. You start living life on your own terms, rather than trying to meet some external standard that doesn't even exist. It's not that seeking approval is inherently bad, it's human to want to be liked, to want to belong. But the problem arises when you let that need for approval dictate your decisions. When you're always chasing validation, you're not living authentically. You're living according to other people's expectations, rather than your own desires. The irony is that most people are too busy with their own lives to even notice whether or not you're meeting those expectations. When you stop seeking approval, you start to focus on what truly matters to you. You begin to ask yourself questions that you might not have considered before. What do I want out of life? What makes me feel alive? What are my true passions? And once you start to answer those questions honestly, you can begin to make choices that align with your true self, rather than with what others might think is right for you. Let's say there's someone who's always wanted to travel the world. But they've held back because they're worried about what their family might think, or because they've been told that it's irresponsible to leave behind a stable job. For years, they've played it safe, following the expected path. But deep down, they've always had this yearning for adventure. One day, they realize that the people whose opinions they've been so worried about aren't actually paying that much attention. Everyone is living their own lives, focused on their own problems. So, they stop waiting for approval and decide to book the trip. And once they do, they feel a sense of freedom and excitement that they haven't felt in years. They're finally doing something for themselves, not because it's what's expected, but because it's what they truly want. Another powerful outcome of realizing that no one cares as much as you think is the ability to embrace your quirks. The things that make you different, the oddities, the imperfections, the unique qualities that you might have hidden because you were afraid of judgment, those are often the very things that make you special. When you stop worrying about fitting into a mold, you allow yourself to lean into those quirks. And the beautiful thing is, when you embrace your authentic self, you attract the right people into your life. The people who appreciate you for who you are, not for some version of yourself that you think you need to be in order to be accepted. Think about someone who's always been a bit eccentric. Maybe they have a unique sense of style, or they're passionate about something niche that most people don't understand. For years, they've toned themselves down, trying to blend in and avoid drawing too much attention. But when they finally stop caring about what others think, they start to express themselves more freely. They dress the way they want to dress, they talk openly about their passions, and they stop hiding the things that make them unique. And what happens? They begin to attract people who share their interests, who appreciate their authenticity, and who love them for exactly who they are. This is the magic of living authentically. When you stop conforming to what you think society expects of you, you start to live a life that feels truer to who you are. You find success not by following a prescribed path, but by forging your own. Whether it's in your personal life, your career, or your relationships, authenticity is the key to true fulfillment. When you live authentically, you're no longer living for others, you're living for yourself. Consider someone who's been playing it safe in their career, following the traditional path because it seemed like the right thing to do. They've been successful by societal standards, but deep down, they feel unfulfilled. They've always had a dream of starting their own business, but they've held back because they were afraid of what people might say if they failed. But one day, they realized that no one's opinion matters as much as they've been led to believe. So, they take the leap. They start their business, and while it's not easy, they find a sense of purpose and excitement that was missing from their life before. They're no longer living for external validation, they're living in alignment with their true self. This shift, from living for others to living for yourself, creates a sense of freedom and empowerment that can't be overstated. When you stop worrying about what others think, you're free to make bold choices, to take risks, and to pursue the things that truly matter to you. You're no longer weighed down by the fear of judgment or the need for approval. You're free to be exactly who you are, unapologetically. And in doing so, you create a life that's richer, more fulfilling, and more aligned with your values and desires. No one cares as much as you think they do, and once you embrace that, you unlock a kind of freedom that allows you to live authentically, pursue your passions, and stop seeking approval from others. You begin to focus on what truly matters to you, and that's where real fulfillment begins. Lesson 8. Find your craft. Finding your craft is one of the most powerful ways to connect with yourself and the world around you. A craft, whether it's writing, painting, woodworking, or even something like gardening or coding, offers a creative outlet that allows you to express yourself in ways words often can't. It's not just about mastering a skill, it's about finding something that feels like it's part of you, something that gives your life a deeper sense of meaning and purpose. When you discover your craft, you unlock a part of yourself that may have been dormant for years, and the process of engaging in that craft becomes a way to discover more about who you really are. For many people, identifying their craft is the hardest part. In a world filled with distractions and obligations, it's easy to lose touch with the things that ignite your creative spark. But finding your craft doesn't have to be complicated. It begins with paying attention to what makes you feel alive, to the activities that draw you in and make time seem to disappear. Maybe you're someone who loves to tinker with machines, finding joy in taking things apart and putting them back together. Or maybe you've always been drawn to storytelling, finding pleasure in writing short stories or journaling. The key is to follow those small nudges, the things that make you feel curious, excited, and fulfilled, and allow yourself to explore them more deeply. Take someone who's spent years working a corporate job, feeling disconnected from their creative side. They've always loved drawing, but it's something they haven't pursued since childhood. One day, they pick up a sketchbook again, almost as a whim, and start drawing in the evenings after work. At first, it feels rusty, and they question whether it's even worth it. But over time, as they draw more and more, they realize that this small act of creation brings them peace and joy in a way that nothing else does. It's not about the end result, it's about the process. It's about the quiet moments of focus when the rest of the world falls away and they can just be in that creative flow. This becomes their craft, not something they need to be perfect at, but something that gives them fulfillment simply by doing it. Once you identify your craft, the next step is to develop it consistently. Creativity is like a muscle, the more you use it, the stronger it gets. It's easy to fall into the trap of waiting for inspiration to strike, thinking that creativity is something that just happens when the mood is right. But the truth is, creativity thrives on consistency. It's not about waiting for the perfect idea or the perfect moment, it's about showing up every day, even when you don't feel particularly inspired. It's in the act of creating, day in and day out, that your skills start to grow and your craft begins to evolve. Think of a writer who dreams of publishing a novel but struggles to find the time or the motivation to write. At first, they wait for the moments when inspiration strikes, only to realize that those moments are few and far between. So, they make a commitment to write every day, even if it's just for 30 minutes. Some days, the words flow easily, and they feel like they're on fire creatively. Other days, it's a slog, and every sentence feels forced. But over time, they start to notice something. The more they write, the easier it becomes. The ideas come more freely, and their writing starts to improve. It's not about waiting for inspiration anymore, it's about trusting the process and showing up consistently, knowing that the act of creating will bring its own rewards. This is where the importance of trusting the creative process comes in. Creativity can be unpredictable. Some days, it feels like magic, ideas seem to flow effortlessly, and everything falls into place. Other days, it feels like you're stuck in the mud, trying to force something that just isn't there. But part of finding your craft is learning to trust that the process will lead you somewhere meaningful, even when it doesn't feel that way in the moment. Take a musician who's trying to compose a new piece of music. They sit down at the piano, ready to create, but nothing seems to come. The notes sound off, the melody doesn't work, and frustration starts to build. But instead of walking away, they trust the process. They keep playing, experimenting with different chords and rhythms, even if it feels messy and unproductive. And then, out of nowhere, a melody emerges, something they hadn't planned, but something that feels right. That's the beauty of the creative process. It often surprises you, taking you in directions you didn't expect. But it only happens if you're willing to stick with it, to push through the uncertainty and trust that the act of creating will eventually lead you somewhere worthwhile. One of the most profound gifts of engaging in a creative craft is the way it helps you tap into your inner self. When you create, you're not just making something external, you're also discovering new aspects of your personality and potential. Creativity has a way of revealing things about yourself that you didn't even know were there. It's a form of self-expression that goes beyond words, allowing you to explore emotions, thoughts, and ideas in a way that feels authentic and true to who you are. Consider someone who's taken up pottery as a hobby. They didn't start with any grand aspirations, they just thought it might be fun to work with their hands and make something tangible. But as they spend more time at the pottery wheel, they start to notice how the process connects them to something deeper. The feel of the clay, the rhythm of shaping it, the patience required, it all becomes a form of meditation, a way to process emotions and thoughts they hadn't been fully aware of. Through their craft, they discover a new sense of calm, a connection to their inner world that wasn't as accessible before. It's not about creating the perfect pot, it's about the journey of self-discovery that happens along the way. That's the beauty of finding your craft. It's not just about the outcome, but about the process itself. When you focus on the journey of creation, rather than the final product, you start to find fulfillment in the act of creating, no matter what the result looks like. You begin to appreciate the small moments of progress, the times when things click into place, as well as the moments of frustration and failure. All of it becomes part of the experience, part of the growth that happens when you commit to your craft. Imagine a photographer who spends hours trying to capture the perfect shot. They hike to remote locations, wait for the right light, and take dozens of photos, many of which don't turn out the way they hoped. But in the midst of all that effort, they find joy in the process. It's not just about the final image, it's about the experience of being in nature, of seeing the world through their lens, of practicing their craft and improving with each click of the shutter. The journey itself becomes the reward, and the final photo, whether perfect or not, is simply a bonus. When you focus on the process of creation, rather than just the outcome, you start to find a deeper sense of fulfillment. You're no longer tied to external validation or the need for perfection. Instead, you're driven by the joy of creating, by the satisfaction that comes from dedicating yourself to something meaningful. And in that dedication, you begin to discover new aspects of yourself, new talents, new passions that you might not have known existed. Finding your craft is a deeply personal journey. It's about discovering what makes you come alive, what gives your life a sense of purpose and meaning. And once you find it, the act of creating becomes more than just a hobby, it becomes a way of life, a way to connect with yourself and the world around you in a deeper, more meaningful way. Lesson 9. Discipline equals freedom. Discipline often gets a bad reputation. People associate it with restriction, deprivation, and rigid rules that sap the joy out of life. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Discipline, when understood correctly, is the key to freedom. It's what allows you to live life on your own terms, to achieve the goals you've set for yourself, and to experience a sense of control over your own destiny. In fact, discipline creates the very structure that gives you the freedom to pursue what really matters. It all starts with creating a structured routine. Think about how chaotic life can feel when there's no plan, no consistency, just an endless barrage of things coming at you from all directions. Without structure, you're constantly reacting to whatever happens to pop up, and you end up feeling scattered and overwhelmed. A routine, on the other hand, gives you control. It sets the tone for your day and allows you to focus on the things that are most important to you. Take someone who wakes up every morning without a plan. They hit the snooze button a few times, scroll through social media, and eventually get out of bed with no clear direction. The rest of their day follows suit, unstructured, reactive, and unproductive. They feel like they're always playing catch-up, never fully in control of their time. Now compare that to someone who has established a morning routine. They wake up at the same time every day, start with a few minutes of meditation or exercise, eat a healthy breakfast, and then dive into their most important tasks. Their routine creates a sense of calm and focus, allowing them to approach the day with intention and purpose. That's the power of discipline. It gives you the structure you need to be productive and to stay focused on what matters most. But discipline isn't just about following a routine. It's also about pushing through discomfort. There's a reason why so many people struggle with discipline. It's hard. It requires you to do things that aren't always enjoyable, to push past the moments when you'd rather quit, and to keep going even when it feels like nothing is working. Discipline forces you to confront the discomfort that comes with growth. But it's in those uncomfortable moments that real progress happens. Imagine an athlete training for a marathon. The early mornings, the long runs, the exhaustion, they all add up to a significant amount of discomfort. There are days when the athlete doesn't want to get out of bed, when every step feels like a battle, when it would be so much easier to quit. But they don't quit. They push through the discomfort because they know that's what it takes to achieve their goal. And with each run, they become a little stronger, a little faster, a little more capable of enduring the pain. That's the beauty of discipline. It teaches you that discomfort is not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced. It's a necessary part of the process, and it's what leads to growth. The same applies to any goal, whether it's building a business, learning a new skill, or pursuing a personal passion. Discipline means sticking to your goals even when motivation fades. Motivation is a fleeting thing. It's easy to feel inspired when you're excited about something, but that excitement doesn't last forever. There will be days when the initial burst of energy is gone, and all that's left is the hard work. That's when discipline kicks in. It's the ability to keep going, to stay committed to your goals, even when you don't feel like it. Think of someone who's decided to start a side hustle. At first, they're filled with enthusiasm, staying up late to work on their project, filled with ideas and energy. But as time goes on, the initial excitement wears off, and the reality of how much work is involved starts to set in. The long hours, the setbacks, the slow progress, it's easy to lose motivation. But the person who sticks with it, who shows up every day even when it's hard, is the one who ultimately succeeds. That's what discipline is. It's showing up, putting in the work, and staying focused on the long-term vision, even when the short-term feels frustrating. One of the most rewarding aspects of discipline is the sense of fulfillment that comes with it. When you achieve a goal that you've worked hard for, there's a deep sense of pride and satisfaction that can't be replicated by anything else. It's not just about the end result, it's about knowing that you stayed true to your commitments, that you pushed through the hard times, and that you achieved something through your own efforts. This feeling of accomplishment is what fuels further success. Take someone who sets out to get in shape. At the beginning, it's tough, early mornings at the gym, sore muscles, and the constant temptation to skip a workout or indulge in unhealthy food. But over time, they start to see results. Their body gets stronger, their endurance improves, and they feel more confident in themselves. And while the physical changes are rewarding, the real fulfillment comes from knowing that they did it. They stuck to their routine, they pushed through the discomfort, and they achieved their goal. That sense of accomplishment creates a positive feedback loop, fueling further discipline and success in other areas of their life. But perhaps the greatest gift of discipline is the freedom it brings. It might sound counterintuitive. How can following a strict routine and sticking to difficult goals lead to freedom? But that's exactly what happens. Discipline gives you control over your life. It allows you to prioritize what's truly important to you, to achieve the goals that matter most, and to live life on your own terms. Think of a musician who has always dreamed of performing on stage. They've spent years honing their craft, practicing for hours every day, even when it was difficult, even when no one was watching. The discipline they developed gave them the freedom to pursue their passion fully. When they step on stage for their first performance, they're not just experiencing the thrill of that moment, they're reaping the rewards of all the hard work that came before it. Discipline gave them the freedom to chase their dreams, to create a life that aligns with their passions and values. This is what discipline ultimately leads to, the freedom to live life the way you want. It's not about restriction or limitation, it's about empowerment. When you master discipline, you gain the ability to shape your own future, to make choices that align with your true desires, and to pursue the things that bring you fulfillment and joy. You're no longer at the mercy of fleeting motivation or external circumstances, you're in control. And that's the truest form of freedom there is. You are the hero of your own journey. Life is filled with challenges, heartbreak, and moments that test your strength, but it's in those moments that you find who you truly are. By embracing your authenticity, facing your fears, and practicing discipline, you unlock doors to self-discovery and personal growth. Through your creative outlets and the willingness to stay true to yourself, you create a life of meaning and purpose. Every step you take, no matter how difficult, brings you closer to the person you're meant to be. You have the power to shape your story, never forget that. Thank you for sticking with us until the end. Your likes and subscription are very important to us. Help us keep the Books Project alive and continue delivering high-quality content. Wishing you peace, and see you next time.